Hello, Incredible Moms. This is Crystal Evaristo with the Incredible Moms podcast, where we discuss getting pregnant, being pregnant, having babies, being a mom, and so much more. We hope you enjoy the show. I'm here with Cate today. She's going to talk about her one biological son and her 3 adopted sons.
Yeah. So basically, right now I live in a frat house, which is a lot of people eating. There's a lot of fart jokes, and I don't think my house will ever smell fine again. But that's what it's like to have 4 boys at home. So let me start with how I got to be a mom of 4 boys. We were thinking about starting a family really soon after we got married. But I was in a car accident in 2012 that I'm still dealing with chronic pain from. And I was going through a lot of treatments, and I was on pain medication for 3 years. And during that time, I also found out that I had PCOS. So we went to the fertility doctor, and because I was on pain medication, they sent me to a maternal fetal specialist, and they basically said, if you were to conceive, your child would be born addicted to drugs and have to go through withdrawal. And so I cried the whole way home. And then my husband and I decided that was not going to be an option. So we started looking into other ways to start a family, and we were thinking about straight up adoption, but we met with some friends that ended up adopting through an open adoption, but they went through 3 failed adoptions before they got their daughter. And that kind of really scared us away from doing any kind of just straight adoption, because we didn't have that kind of money to just throw around, because you risk losing that money if the mother chooses to keep her child. So we decided we can't do that. So we looked into fostering, and our next door neighbor at the time, she worked for Wake County Department of Social Services. And she recommended looking into some private agencies for fostering, since our end goal was to adopt. So we started looking into different agencies, and we ended up choosing Children's Home Society, which turned out to be really wonderful. They have a lot of resources, which is good for foster parents. And so we went through 10 weeks of classes. And at the same time, my husband was studying for his license for engineering. So it's a certain level of engineering, and he wanted to become a senior engineer. So at the same time, he was studying for that. So we kind of took our time filling out the paperwork and sending it to the state. And overall, that process took we started the classes in June of 2017. And we were officially licensed in 2016 is when we started the classes. And then we were officially licensed in March of 2017. And we chose to go with ages 0 to 5, boys or girls. We're open to sibling sets, which is, saying, okay, we want at least one child in that 0 to 5 range, and we're open to siblings that are either in that range or above that range. So we got some calls. Most of them were in our range, but as it goes with fostering, you're trying to find the right fit for your family, but also for that child. So sometimes we had to say no to the calls. It just wasn't going to work out. And then we got a call in May for an 8-month-old baby girl and then a 3-year-old boy. And they were siblings, but they ended up only staying with us for a week. And we were devastated. We loved them from the start. I always wanted a baby girl, so it was kind of everything I had dreamed of. And then a week later, they were sent back. So we were really devastated. And we had to think, can we go through this again, knowing, we could end up, not with the kids that are sent to us, can we say goodbye again? So we thought about it. We prayed about it. We decided, okay, we're going to move forward after we gave ourselves a little bit of time to grieve. Because I think I slept with her blanket for about a week until it didn't smell like her anymore. Oh. So it was just, you had to go through that grieving process just like it. I mean, even though they were only with us a week, I mean, we were their parents for a week and they were fantastic kids. They were so smart, so sweet. They were wonderful kids. So we ended up in September 11th of 2017. We got a call that morning. I had a hip procedure that day.
Oh, jeez.
And we got a call for these 3 little boys. And remember how I said I always wanted a baby girl? Well, we got a look at these little boys. At the time, they were 14 months. They were 2 and 4. Wow. So they were all very close in age, very cute little boys.
And they were siblings.
They're siblings. Yes, they're all half brothers. There's more siblings kind of spread out, but wow. I can get into that later. But so we got these 3 boys. It was an emergency placement, so they had to come that afternoon. Luckily, it was not, hip surgery, so I was able to move around. It was, but we kind of had to scramble and prepare. We only had 2 rooms set up at our house, so we had to go through the 3rd room and basically childproof it, take everything out and shove it in a closet just so we could be ready. And we had to go to Walmart, get an extra car seat because we only had 2, and just kind of scramble to make sure, because when they're coming, you don't know what they're coming with. So you kind of want to have the essentials on hand just in case. And they showed up, I think about 3:00 that afternoon. And my middle son, which is very much his personality, burst through the door and was basically, "Hi, I'm here." So, and that's very much my middle son. He's just very open, has no boundaries. So he hasn't met a stranger. And that was interesting. Luckily, my husband's job had given them paternity leave, 6 months. Or I'm sorry, 6 months, I wish. 6 weeks paid paternity leave. And so he was able to take that right away. And luckily, because I did not know how to mom, and all of a sudden I had 3 little boys who not only had the energy of little boys, but they also had a lot of needs that need to be met emotionally, going through the motions of, okay, these boys don't trust us yet. They need to get to know us. We have to show them that they're safe here and it's okay. And, so we went through that with them, and eventually they were able to settle down and trust us. And they knew that we wanted to adopt them. So it was very much, you're safe here. If God allows it, you're going to stay here for life, and we're going to be your mom and dad for life. So that was September of 2017. And my husband and I were starting to talk about, okay, do we want to have a biological child? These boys are all really close in age, so we don't want a big gap if we're going to have a biological child. I got my IUD taken out in, I want to say it was March of 2018. We started trying pretty much right away.
How long after you guys started fostering them did you do that?
Okay, so they came in September of 2017, and we took out my IUD in March of 2018.
Oh, okay.
So we were still fostering at that time, but we weren't sure if we were going to be able to. But I did know my cycle for some reason. My Fitbit is what helped me with that. Oh. It helped me. It said, hey, you're ovulating. I said, and then I took an ovulation test and said, okay, it's accurate. Wow. So we started trying the first month. It didn't happen. So we were bummed about that, but it was the first month. The second month I got pregnant. Wow. So it was very much unexpected. I didn't realize I could get pregnant that easily. And it wasn't until I got pregnant that my doctor said, oh yeah, you're on metformin. That makes you super fertile. So I said, oh, okay. That would have been good to know. So, then we started to think, okay, this is awesome, but how are their social workers going to feel about this? Because, we didn't think it was going to happen this fast. And then, you kind of go through those cycles where like, okay, this was too easy. When's the other shoe going to drop? Or, it shouldn't have happened this easily, because I've been through some tough times in my life and I've pretty much learned nothing should be that easy that you really want. Right. And it usually never is. So I got really, really anxious. So we had to tell our social workers, hey, we're pregnant. And they said, as long as you have a good support system and you still want to adopt the boys, we're fine with it. Awesome. So we were really lucky. I was really nervous to tell them, but, they were really supportive of us and they knew we loved the boys. They knew we wanted to adopt. So it really wasn't an issue for them. And my pregnancy was so easy. I was so lucky. My pregnancy was fabulous. I didn't have any morning sickness. I got huge really fast. So Milo is my biological son. And I somehow knew if I got pregnant, it would be a boy. And I was right because I always wanted a girl. So throw a fourth boy in there. I never had any of those issues. I didn't have gestational diabetes. I didn't have morning sickness. I got tired, but that was pretty much it. I never had any swelling. So I was really lucky. I loved being pregnant. It was seeing him move in my belly was really cool. And I kind of soaked it all up because I didn't know that was ever going to happen for me. So I was super excited that it was happening. And he was super active my whole pregnancy. There was one day where he didn't move and it freaked me out. And I had one of those home Dopplers. And so I would go every time. I would just check in on him frequently just because it helped with my anxiety. Yeah. But just that one day that I could still hear his heartbeat and know that he was okay in there. That really, really helped me.
How far along were you at that point?
That was in my third trimester. So that would have been November or December. And he was measuring ahead my whole pregnancy. He was always, my OB called him Hoss Baby because he was just so big. And I was actually really lucky that, I know it sounds bad, but I was really lucky that my brother had a heart condition when he was born, because that automatically bumped me up to a maternal fetal specialist. So I got to see him a lot more than other people get to see theirs. Luckily, there was nothing wrong with Milo. He was totally fine, but I got to see him a lot, which was great. So, I loved, seeing him and see, he was always moving. Every time we had an ultrasound, he was, even in the first one, you would see those little gummy arms kind of wiggling around. And I told my mom that I knew he was coming early. I just had it in my head. He was coming early. And my parents were visiting when I was 34 weeks. And I kept seeing some, I don't know if I should say trigger warning, but I saw a little bit of blood and it just kept coming. And so I freaked out. This was at 4:30 in the morning. I freaked out and called my OB. And, I said, I'm really scared. there's blood and it wasn't like gushing, but every time I wiped it was there. It was red blood. So I freaked out and they sent me to the hospital and my dad drove me. And I decided after that he was never going to drive me again because he drove me a little bit insane on the way. He was nervous, but he was trying not to show it. And, he was just the whole ride, like, breathe, it's okay, calm. But I didn't need to hear that then. Like, I just needed to be quiet so I could focus because I was cramping and it was, so I didn't need to hear that on the way. So I decided after that he was never going to drive me again while I was pregnant. But I got to the hospital. My husband showed up and they tested me. They said, we don't know why, but you're fine. But you are going to deliver early. I mean, it's just it's looking that way. So did
they do any swabs or anything to tell you that? Or like, because there's certain swabs that can tell that that you're going to go in labor in the next like week or two or something.
I don't know that they did a swab. I'm sorry. They did test some fluid. So I don't know if that's what you're thinking about. Because they were trying to see, I think they tested, after I wiped and there was a little bit of blood. Mm-hmm. They tested something. And then they did an ultrasound in the hospital. And the doctor that was there said, you have a lot of fluid, a lot. You have like 2 liters of fluid.
Wow.
He was huge and my belly was enormous. So I really wasn't surprised. But he said, when you go into labor, you're going to know it because you have so much fluid. It's hard to miss, which is funny because that's actually not what happened at all. So they basically said, you're probably going to deliver early. It's just going to look that way. I mean, he's huge and, you've already, I guess that was the bloody show, maybe.
Sounds like it.
What's that?
It sounds like it.
Yeah. So I think they were thinking that that was my mucus plug and eventually it was, going to happen sooner than later. So I left the hospital and I kept just thinking, it's going to happen early. It's going to happen early. I actually called my mom. I think I was right around the end of 36 weeks. And I said, Mom, I think he's coming soon. I hadn't had any contractions or anything, but I just had a feeling, you need to come visit. Because my husband worked and my boys, had to go to and from school, that it would have been really hard for me to get to the hospital without help. With my boys and, my husband would be with me. So I called her and said, I think you need to come. So she took the train from Charlotte to Raleigh and I picked her up and I just was having a lot of Braxton Hicks and just, just very uncomfortable. I kept getting those, I don't know if you've heard the term, I'm sure you have, lightning vag. Where it's like you have shooting pains.
I've never heard it referred to as that, but yeah. I think I've experienced it personally.
That's what I call it, lightning vagina. But those shooting pains that just go and they stop you in your tracks and you go, whoa, what was that? So I kept having those and I, had to sit down a lot because he was really low the whole time too. So it was just uncomfortable. I was miserable. And so she came and she stayed. And the night before she was going to go back, she was helping my husband put something in the attic. And I felt a little gush of something. And, so I said, I don't know if it's my water that broke. I mean, they said I would know it. So but I started to get some cramping and just really uncomfortable. So I told my husband, I don't know if I did or not. I mean, I soaked a panty liner in a few seconds, but I was thinking it was going to be way more than that. So I called my OB and they said, well, lie down for, I think they said like 3 hours or something where you can't move. And then all of a sudden you got to get up. And they said, if you have any more leakage after you get up, then you probably broke your water. And that didn't happen. But that whole night I just was so uncomfortable. And I kept thinking, if I'm not in labor, then what is labor like? Because this is really uncomfortable. And, the contractions were so inconsistent that they weren't strong enough and they weren't close. I mean, one would be a minute apart and the next one would be like 5 minutes apart. They were so all over the place. I was tracking them because I was just so uncomfortable that I said, so my mom took me to Bojangles the next morning and I got a spicy chicken biscuit because I'm like, I'm going to get this kid out of me before she has to go back. And, I kept feeling like, something's not right. So I called my OB again and I said, can I come in and get checked? Because I just feel like, I'm having contractions, but they're kind of all over the place. And, I had that leaking last night. So they said, come on in. And I was lying on the table and all of a sudden I heard a pop and then water just came rushing out of me all over the table. And I'm just sitting there going, well, someone's going to need a mop in here because it was just like, I'm just on their table. And I just, it's almost like you pee. It's just embarrassing. It feels like you peed yourself or something because you're just sitting there and water just flowing out of you. So I wait for the nurse to come in and I said, I'm pretty sure my water just broke on your table. And she said, yes, it did. There's no mistaking that. So she checked me and said, go ahead to the hospital, especially because you probably did leak a little bit the night before. And this is just, the rest of it. So they were afraid of infection at that point because it had been so long since I thought my water broke. So I went to the hospital and my husband met me there. I was excited because, I was having more cramping and it was bad, but it wasn't intolerable. And I walked in, I'm like, is this what labor feels like? Because
like, this is easy.
This is great. The nurse is like, because you're smiling, it's definitely not. So I said, well, darn, I really thought that I had a high pain tolerance. I can do this. Sent me into a delivery room and I got all comfortable. And my whole plan the whole time was to go natural because I wanted to see if I could do it. So I brought my TENS unit, which my doctor okayed with me using. So I guess I should explain what that is for people that don't know. It's these electrode pads on wires, and this little unit sends electrical pulses to stimulate your muscles, and it's for pain relief. And so I had bought big electrode pads for my back, and I brought that with me, and I just thought, yes, I'm going to do this. I have my TENS unit, and I'm going to get through it. I wanted to do the nitrous oxide too, if I needed it. So I had all those things with me, and then the doctor said, well, you only broke your front waters. We still need to break your back waters. So I didn't even know there were two different ones.
Like a 4-bag behind the baby, basically. Yeah.
So, she broke it. You have a lot of fluid when the nurse is actually impressed with the amount of water that's coming out of you. Because she was genuinely surprised and impressed by it. And it was actually kind of embarrassing because, it just keeps coming. I think it took about 5 minutes to fully stop. Geez. It was a lot of fluid. So, then the contractions really started to ramp up after they broke that. But
were you dilated when you got to the hospital at all?
I think I was at a 3 at that point. So not super dilated.
But enough to get the party started.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And I think normally they don't really send you at 3 centimeters, right? Don't they tell you to go home?
If your water is broken, they'll keep you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So they, then I put on my TENS and I did the nitrous oxide, and I did that that was at noon. And I did that for about 5 hours. And then I decided this sucks. Give me the juice.
Give me the juice.
I can't do this anymore. I was in total misery. And my husband is not the person. I love him dearly. He just doesn't know the right thing to say. And he didn't know how to help me in a way that was actually going to help me because I'm in pain. He doesn't know how to take that, he can't take that pain away. So, he would just say, breathe, or, just breathe, relax, do the gas. I'm like, I feel like I'm, lightning badge times 1,000 right now. Like, it hurts. And I don't think you know how much this hurts. And they kept checking me with my contractions, and they were just so all over the place that, they decided we're going to give you some Pitocin because they're not strong enough. They're not consistent enough to be able to push. So they did give me a little bit of Pitocin, and that did help kind of make the contractions stronger. At that time, they did come in to give me the epidural, which was amazing. But only one side took at first. And so I was lying there in bed trying to relax, but one side still really hurt. So I was kind of asking them, can they bump it up a little bit because it still really hurts, but the pain's only on one side. So I'm feeling it only on this side, and it somehow made it more intense. So they did up the epidural for me. And just about the time I got comfortable, they said, okay, it's go time. You're 10 centimeters. So I didn't get to relax at all. And if I had to do it all over again, I totally would have done the epidural long before that so I could actually rest before I had to start pushing. So luckily, my favorite OB, I love her, Dr. Rush. She's amazing. She was on call. What's that?
From Cam McKenzie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love her. She's just so calming and so sweet and encouraging that, I always wanted her to be the one that delivered Milo. And thank God she was there. So she kind of came and went, and the nurses were fabulous. I delivered a big wake, and the nurses were so great. Right off the bat, they're like, yes, you're a great pusher. You can do this. And I was like, oh, maybe he's going to come really fast. That definitely did not happen. And it was, I pushed for 4 hours. And I know with your first one, it takes a while, right? I mean, usually. Yeah. So, I thought, yes, I'm a great pusher. He's going to come out really easily. I failed to keep in mind that he has my husband's large head. Ugh. So that took 4 hours to push out. But once the head was out, everything just slid right out.
Oh, thank God.
Because at one point I was like, please just get the forceps. Like, help me out here. I'm so tired.
I'll take anything at this point.
Yeah. I'm like, do the suction. And then they kind of guilt you. They're like, no, you don't want to do that because of risk of, of what the hematoma or all those risks. And you're like, okay, I guess I'll keep pushing. So, so I pushed for 4 hours, and he finally came out, and, he was just as cute as all those ultrasounds. So lucky for me.
Oh,
but yeah, so Milo Everett was born on I can't even talk right now.
Same.
January 24th of 2019. He was 8 pounds, 1 ounce at 37 weeks, 4 days.
Wow.
So he was a big boy. So thankfully he did not stay in me longer than that because he was probably going to be 10 pounds by the time he was born. Yeah. So we stayed at the hospital for, I think it was 2 days, because they're like, you can stay an extra day if you want. And I'm like, yes, I need sleep. Like, we can do this.
You think you're going to sleep in the hospital?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I was so anxious with him that I couldn't sleep, and he would fuss and cry a lot. I had trouble with him latching on. He had like a shallow latch, and he just had trouble latching on. So I got really anxious, and they said, do you want us to take him down to the nursery for a little bit so you can sleep? And, my husband guilted me into saying yes because he's like, you need to rest. You're anxious. You're getting upset. You need some sleep. So I said yes. And they brought him back after 3 hours. But I think that was the longest I slept. So, it was great. But we brought him home to his 3 big brothers who are obsessed with him. And they just love them some Milo. They really, they had expressed some concerns to me that I would love the baby more than them before he was born. But I had to explain to them that with adoption, it's a choice to love. So every day I wake up and choose to love them because, it's different. It's not biological. It's a more, what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, you're choosing.
Instinctual.
So, it's not, because with Milo, there was never a question of did I love him or not? He was biologically programmed to be loved.
Yeah.
But with my older sons, it was kind of like a relationship. You learn to trust each other, you like each other, and then you learn to love each other. And that's how it was with my older sons. And so I tell them all the time, adoption means every day I wake up and choose to love you and choose to give you a good life and choose to be what you need. And I have to remind them of that still now sometimes. But they have been so amazing with Milo. They are so sweet with him. He is so spoiled by them. And that's probably the reason he doesn't talk yet, because they just do everything for him and talk for him all the time.
He's what, 2.5?
Not yet. He'll be 2 in January.
Oh, my math is off.
Yeah,
okay.
But he's as big as a 2.5-year-old still. He's a big boy.
Yeah, you saw mine. He just turned 2 a month ago.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, my 4-year-old now is very small for his age. And from far away, they look like they might be twins.
Oh, wow.
Because they're almost the same size. I think he has 2 pounds on Milo. Jeez. He's just really tiny and Milo's just really big. But they have always been amazing with him. And that has been a huge blessing for us as parents. And we had him January 24th of 2019, and we officially adopted the boys on March 1st of 2019. So 5 weeks between, which was really great because then Milo got to be at the adoption ceremony. And everybody then had the same last name. So that was kind of nice how it worked out, I guess.
Yeah, that's really nice. I know it's always hard, like even in a biological children's situation, like leaving your kids to go have another baby. Like, I feel like that's always like the hardest part for me. Like, it's so sad, like you feel like, oh my God, how am I going to spread love to another kid? Like, right. Do I have enough inside of me?
Yeah. Well, I kind of got broken of that though, with the fact that I went from 0 kids to 3 kids right away.
That's true.
Because it kind of had to be all divvied out at once anyway.
Exactly.
Because they all had different needs at that time. And, we went through, some aggression with our oldest, and our middle son is our boundary tester. That's just who he is. That's always going to be who he is.
Yeah.
And our youngest wasn't walking yet at 14 months. So, we had our work cut out for us in the beginning, and, and we'd never had a newborn. So we were brand new parents, but we weren't. Right. Because we'd never done the sleepless nights or the cluster feedings or any of that fun stuff. So
yeah. Wow, I can imagine.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking, so you initially had chosen fostering and adoption because you were on meds that would affect the baby when they came out. Were you off those meds when you got pregnant with Milo?
I was, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I've been off of those since, let's see, it'll be, I think it's 3 years it was 3 years in September.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've been off of them. It was a choice for me because I just felt like, they weren't doing good things for my body long term. I was starting to show some liver damage already, so I just said, get me off of them now. And I chose to withdraw quicker than my doctor recommended. So he recommended, I think, 42 days, and I think I did it in 24.
Wow.
Because I just wanted to be done. So,
Right.
yeah. So, I mean, it was, and I've had people ask me, what's the difference between you having a child that's addicted and taking care of children that are addicted? And, because that's what the question people would always ask me when I was on pain meds and we were looking at fostering. And I would just tell them the difference is that I'm not the one inflicting that on the child. I'm helping the problem, not creating it. Because people, they don't understand fostering. And so I think that's why I'm so open about all of it, because there's so many misconceptions about a lot of it. I mean, yes, you're taking on kids that they've been through trauma through no fault of their own. And I kind of look at it as you're trying to heal wounds that you don't know what they are and where they came from.
Right.
So, you're constantly on a scavenger hunt for like, what do they need? How can I help? Sort of thing. So, I mean, it's different than, having your biological child, because everything they've been through from the second you knew about them. Whereas my kids, I know tidbits here and there, but I don't know everything. And subconsciously, they know a lot more than they do consciously. So their body remembers a lot of things that, they may never fully really remember. So you're dealing with behaviors that they don't know why they're doing it.
Right.
So it's just different in so many ways.
Yeah. So was there any well, first of all, you had to do classes to become a foster parent. What did those classes entail?
So you go through, have you ever seen the movie Instant Family?
Yes.
Yeah. It's like that, but the instructors aren't as cool. I mean, they're not going to be straight up with you, to be honest. I mean, they give you little bits here and there, but their goal is to get more foster parents, and they're not going to, try to scare you off from the beginning. And so you go through these classes, and they talk about, they kind of walk you through what it's like to be one of these kids. And, they tell you, pretend that, you've started this new job, but you're not fully qualified for it. And deep down, you're not fully qualified for it. And, they start to cut off different strings of your old life. And inside your head, you're constantly thinking, when am I going to be fired? And it's kind of like that for foster kids, because they get sent places, and then sometimes people just give up on them, like my sons. They were in a different foster. Actually, it was a family that was in our foster classes. Oh, and wow. They dropped them off at CPS one day and said, "We're done." And I have a lot of things I could say, but I'm trying not to. But I mean, you got to try to be in these kids' shoes and figure out, what they've been through. And we talked about that in the classes, and we talked about, being ready. Is this really what you want? Because a lot of people say yes, and then they decide while they're going through it, nope, I'm not doing this. So it's 10 weeks. You do a CPR class. You do, it's medication training. So basically, it's kind of like being a nurse. You have to log everything, and you have to get permission before you give them anything.
Even like Tylenol and
yeah.
Motrin.
Yeah. I mean, we had to go to our kids' doctors. I think it was within the first 48 hours of them being placed with us, and basically bring a form, then write down every possible over-the-counter thing you could think of, including Band-Aids and Neosporin.
Oh my God.
And have the doctor sign off on it ahead of time. So, I mean, our youngest had really bad diaper rash, and I couldn't give him even diaper cream until the doctor saw him and signed off on it.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's all these things you don't think about when it's your biological child that, you have to think about extra hard. So we went through those classes and we went through a foster panel in which they had foster families come and talk to us and kind of give us real world experience and share their stories. But mostly the classes talked about positive discipline. And I don't know if you've ever heard of The Connected Child by Karen Purvis.
No.
Well, it talks about, it includes positive discipline, but it's trying to meet kids where they're at and building them up instead of, and giving them independence to make their own decisions rather than, being a dictator that says, do this, do that. Like if the kid is at the playground and doesn't want to leave, you can say, okay, I'm telling you now, in 5 minutes, we can leave, or, we can leave now, or if you want, we can play for 5 more minutes and then leave, and kind of giving the child a choice, but not really giving them a choice.
Yeah.
So they kind of talked about that kind of stuff. And, they talked about what trauma is and what it can do to kids and how it can affect them. Just all those kinds of things. They try to prepare you, but there's no really way to prepare you. I mean, it's, what shows up on your doorstep is, you learn every single day from, what they need.
I'm sure a lot of people don't understand that it's not always like physical trauma or neglect. It's more just the trauma of being like constantly in a state of, I don't know what's going to happen next, where I'm going to be placed. Are they going to love me? Are they going to send me off? Like, I mean,
yes. And that is trauma. So they, trauma can look all different kinds of ways. In my kid's case, there's the trauma of being separated from their birth parents. Then there's the trauma of being separated from any caregivers that they were with and had a relationship with. There's the trauma of the fact that they were exposed to drugs in utero. I mean, that permanently changed the way their brain is wired.
Right.
And it's, there's no way to tell how it's really going to affect them the rest of their life. But that's trauma too. I mean, even things that they weren't directly remembering can change their life forever. And that's considered trauma.
Yeah. Like worked into their, like you said, like the framework of their brain at that point.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you allow the biological parents to have any kind of contact or updates or anything?
So our case is a little bit different in that, so all of my boys have different dads, or birth dads, I guess I should say. And then they have the same birth mom. And there are 7 total. We have 3. And 6 of them are not living with her. And she just had number 7. And thank God, she's doing well. Baby's doing well. She's in a good place to take care of the baby. So, I mean, thank God for that. So they have sibling visits. So the child that was born right around the same time as Milo, we don't have any contact with him, only because the paternal family that has him doesn't want contact.
Okay.
But we have sibling visits with their older brother and their younger sister, who's my middle son's full-blooded sibling.
Okay.
And we used to see him once a month before COVID, but
yeah.
now, and they're actually coming over Sunday I'm making a cake for the oldest brother's birthday, which is
nice.
tomorrow. So it's turning 12. So he's a sweet kid. He reminds me so much of my oldest. But we have a great relationship with the biological family that we do have contact with, because so the oldest brother is living with his paternal grandparents and his birth father. And then the younger sister was adopted by maternal grandma. So
okay.
we have a great relationship with them. It didn't start out that way, just because you think, can I trust them? Can they trust us? But you grow that relationship over time. And I actually am in contact with birth mom. She does not have contact with our boys yet. She is recently sober, like not even a year yet. So we've got to give that time to make sure that she's going to stay clean and sober and that she's in a good place before I will ever let our boys be exposed to her again. Just because, especially with our oldest, he had a really, really strong bond with her, and it would throw him in a tailspin if he were to be able to have any contact with her, but not have it be consistent. So we've got to wait. And I told her, it's hard because, she's their birth mom, but I'm mom.
Yeah.
So I've got to set really strict boundaries with her, and I've got to put my feelings aside, and I can't take her feelings into account totally. I mean, when I first got in contact with her again, and this was in the last year, she was very eager to have contact and was texting me constantly and wanting updates on the boys and sounding like she wanted to have contact with the boys again. And I had to really put my foot down and say, look, he's not in a good place for this. And, my job as his mom is to protect him and do what's best for him, no matter what. So I said, he's only 7. He was just hospitalized in April for depression.
Oh.
So, I mean, he's not there yet.
Right.
And I don't know if he's ever going to be there, but my job first and foremost is to take care of him. Her feelings aside, I mean, it's just, it's not a factor when it comes to my kids. I mean, it's just, I have to do what's best for them. And, but at the same time, I kind of wrestle with that guilt of, if I were to stand in the way of a positive relationship with her that was healthy for everyone, I wouldn't feel good about myself, so, but then at the same time, you do feel a little bit of, is he gonna, I don't want to say love her more, but, just, is he going to, bond with her more than he has with me? It's just kind of weird to think about that. But, I think I have some insecurities about that. That,
sure.
Someday it may happen. And, I have to be supportive and put my feelings aside. But it's hard because you love him and you're his mom now. And, someday there may be another mom in his life.
Yeah. And I think it's still relatively new and you're still working on things with him and building a mom relationship with him and all that. So.
Yes.
Was there anything like when you guys were waiting to get called for kids or a kid, was there anything that was a deal breaker for you, like certain situations?
So when you go into fostering, you kind of fill out, and it's weird to say this, but you fill out a preference sheet, and it's really more of a, what are you open? So they say there's 3 columns. There's not open to it at all, possibly open to it, definitely open to it. And they have all different kinds of situations on there. And it can range from behavioral issues to schizophrenia. I mean, it's like kind of all over the place. So we were open to different genders, different races, but within the 0 to 5 age range, preferably. And then sibling sets we were okay with because we had a 4-bedroom house. And I was comfortable with a lot more things than my husband was, just because my background is in occupational therapy with pediatrics. So I have worked with a lot of special needs kids. My husband, on the other hand, had zero experience with kids at all. So he was great with them. He would play with them and interact with them well. But I used to be a assistant teacher in a toddler room, and I ran a special needs camp back in Ohio where I lived. And then I went into occupational therapy. So I had a lot of experience with a lot of different things that, scared my husband just because he didn't know anything about them. Mm-hmm. And, it's kind of funny, and I hope no one gets offended by this, but, my husband, I said, what sort of things worry you? And he said, well, I guess with a child of a different race, like I wouldn't know how to do their hair. And it was sweet that that was what he was worried about, because it was never a question, was he going to be a good dad? Like I knew he would be, he was going to put his all into it, but he was worried about those little things that, he didn't. And I'm like, well, I don't either, but we'll learn. I mean, you don't do your own hair. So, you're not going to know how to do girl or boy hair. So, it's just things that they're scary because they're different and you haven't done it yet. But so we put that we were comfortable with, I think said to my husband, a minor disability could be, a hearing impairment or a speech impediment or, things like that I had to remind him that we had to put possibly open to it. Mm-hmm. Because there's such a wide range of disabilities and abilities that, you don't know until you get that call. And we would get calls that, we definitely weren't comfortable with. I know, and I'll be totally honest about this because I'm honest about mostly everything. But I am a survivor of sexual assault, and I, just knowing myself, don't know that I could take in a child that was sexually aggressive, because it might throw me back into PTSD, right, where, I'm having flashbacks of what happened to me. So, we talked about those kinds of things about, what could we handle and what could we not? And for a lot of things we put possibly, because you just don't know until you get that call.
Right. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
So did you run into any big obstacles in the process of between fostering and adopting your kids?
Oh, I would say that the hardest part for us was that we threw all of us into, both of our placements. So, our first ones, when they left, that crushed us. It was heartbreaking. And I offended one of my friends who had a miscarriage in saying that it felt like a miscarriage. It was a loss. Yeah. You're promised this child and then it's taken away. And she didn't really, because she's like, well, you only had him a week. And I'm like, that's all it took. It took a day for me to love them. They were great kids. And, everything I had dreamed of, this beautiful baby girl who was so sweet, and her older brother who was so smart. And, the older brother cried when he found out he had to go back. Oh. And, we're scrambling, and I didn't want to look like I was interfering, but I'm like, he's terrified for a reason, that we should take this into account, that he's scared to go back. So, that was difficult. And I think for me, having to learn to adapt what I thought was going to be my parenting style, and for my husband too. I definitely am more of a strict parent. That's how I was raised, especially my dad. He was really strict, and what he said goes, and there's no arguing. So, I had to learn to be more flexible and to not nitpick over the little things because I had to focus on the progress that we were seeing in our kids. And I still struggle with it, to be honest. I mean, what parent doesn't struggle with it? I mean, it's just hard to learn to set those boundaries. And you look back and you're like, did it really matter? Why did I get so upset about this silly little thing?
Yeah.
And, I still struggle with that. So I think with our kids, until the adoption was complete, I was terrified that they were going to go back, that they were going to be taken away somehow. It's that's scary.
Yeah.
And with Milo, I think the whole time, because it happened so easily that I was just so scared that something bad was going to happen.
Yeah.
But he's perfect and they're perfect. So, it all worked out in the end.
Yeah. I'm kind of like that too. Like if something, I don't want to get too excited about something because something definitely bad will happen if I get too excited,
Yes.
So I get that. Do you have any recommendations for parents that are starting the adoption and fostering process?
Sure. So the one thing I can say about foster parents that's hard is that we tend to kind of isolate ourselves because the outside world doesn't react well to our kids. They have tough behaviors and people either don't understand but they're trying to, or they don't understand and they're not trying to.
Right.
So, I mean, you tend to kind of shy away from, and we've lost friendships because of our kids, because sometimes they have really hard behaviors and, it's not, and I've learned that you have to have a tough skin to be a foster parent. Because when your kid's throwing down, and this is like with any kid too. I mean, kids are going to have tantrums. That's what kids do.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can't let what the outside world thinks about your child or the situation affect you. One time I walked through the grocery store doing my grocery shopping with my 2-year-old screaming because I had stuff to do. So, I mean, I'm like, what? He's having a tantrum. So what? He's going to learn that doing that isn't going to get him what he wants.
Right.
But I mean, I think you have to be a flexible person. You cannot expect these kids to fit seamlessly into your life. That's not what they're intended to do. You're supposed to meet them where they're at and create the way you want your life to look together. And I think that's the hardest thing for a lot of families is you go in with your preferences and expectations and none of that's going to match. Like I said, I wanted a girl. I have 4 boys. So, I mean, you have to be flexible and look at all your resources. Find the right agency, whether you go through the county or a private agency. Do your research, find the one that fits what you need. And, because you're going to get a ton of recommendations from people that have already found their agencies. And so do your homework and be prepared as best you can. And I will say, find your village because the foster world, as small as it is, we all kind of find out about each other and, find out, who has foster kids, who has fostered, who is adopted. Like my husband and myself, we started a foster support group, foster and adopted family support group at our church. And, in case anybody knows it, shameless plug. We go to church at Clayton Crossings. And so it's open to the community. You don't have to be a member of Clayton Crossings, but, I can provide information, I can send something for the Instagram or something to find me. If you're interested in this process, I can definitely answer questions for you. I'm an open book. And, good luck to you if that's what I mean, it's not easy. I'm not going to lie. It's not like parenting biological children.
Right.
In a lot of ways. So, I mean, good luck to you.
We tried fostering my nephew for a while, and very long story, not for this podcast, but it was tough.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, like with the whole abandonment thing, like he was never abused,
right,
physically or really even mentally, but he was tossed around so much that it terrible behaviors. Like it was
reactive attachment disorder.
I mean, we never got far enough to get in a diagnosis, but it was hard. Yeah. And he needed a family that just had him, that could, be home with him 24/7 and help him. And he got that, thank God, just not by my choice, but it all worked out very nicely for him. But
a lot of kids in the foster system have reactive attachment disorder, unfortunately.
And what do they do?
Well, since there is no fix for it, I mean, it's not like something you can just medicate and it all gets better. But a lot of them end up with there's different levels of foster care. There's your kind of basic foster care, and then there's therapeutic level foster care. And surprisingly, that's just a few extra classes. So not that really prepares you, but I mean, those are the types of homes that are ready for the worst of the worst behaviors. But thank God for those people, because if not, a lot of these kids would end up in group homes or, hospital type settings. So, I mean, it's just, and like with our son, you don't expect a 7-year-old to have to go through depression to the point where they're hospitalized, but it happened. And all I can do is be his advocate. Right. And, he had trouble. We had to go through a special type of bonding therapy at first, because especially with our two oldest, they had so many caregivers that, they were used to testing new people, and everybody has different rules. And that's hard for kids to not have that consistency. So it's okay in one house and not okay in another. But we had to go through this different therapy to where we could bond, and we saw a trust building up, and we saw the behaviors decrease. Oh, wow. But I mean, it takes a lot of our kids are probably going to be in some sort of therapy for a very long time, if not lifetime. I mean, they've got a lot of stuff to work through, and they've got a lot of subconscious stuff to work through. Case in point, when they first came, my husband and I were playing around in the pool, and he went to dunk me, and I screamed because I was getting dunked. Our two oldest flipped out, started crying because they were afraid he was hurting me. So it's just those things that, you don't think about, and then you go, oh crap, that probably wasn't the best idea. So, I mean, just trying to keep those things in mind every day is tough too. Our kids hate yelling. They were exposed to a lot of it. So, you have to, not that it's easy, because kids don't like to listen either. So it's like sometimes you have
to. They wouldn't survive in my house.
Yeah. Like I said, my house is a frat house. I mean, it's just crazy all the time, but I love it. They're such good kids.
Yeah. And I think the only other question I have is, I know it's a lot different between private adoption and fostering through the state.
Yes.
Was it a huge financial burden for you to go through the way that you did?
It was the total opposite. So when you go through fostering instead of private adoption, the state pays for daycare. They pay they pay a monthly stipend to help with expenses. It's not a lot. And you definitely should not go into fostering hoping to make it some sort of income. Because
Right.
if you're doing it right, then you're actually spending more than what that stipend is because you're parenting. You're,
Right.
you're buying them what they need. You're, signing them up for activities. You end up paying more.
Yeah.
As
just
you
like
should.
they were your kids because they are your kids.
Yeah. So, you get a monthly stipend, and then, I think every quarter they send a little extra check for, clothes and school supplies and, whatnot. Then so our kids actually, since they get state Medicaid, and they will until they're 18.
Oh, wow.
And that's not for every child. That doesn't happen for every child. It happened for ours because there were a lot of needs in general. So plus ours was technically a special adoption because we adopted 3 kids at once.
Okay.
Whereas if you were to just adopt one, you wouldn't necessarily get an adoption stipend. Because we do get monthly check to help with the expenses for our kids. And they do get WIC until they're 5. But you have to sign the kids up for that. And that helps a lot because boys eat a lot. And I love to cook a lot, which is just great. They get this, and then we decide to keep them on Medicaid just because it was going to be a little bit easier. I mean, so we were going to add our insurance as primary and keep Medicaid as secondary, but it gets kind of tricky when you do that, as far as you have more access to providers, but whatever your insurance doesn't cover, Medicaid's not necessarily going to cover. And they have a lot of needs. I mean, my 2 oldest are on medications. They both have PTSD. My 2 oldest also have ADHD. I'm fairly certain that my second to youngest, my 4-year-old, also has ADHD, as well as possibly some other things. But I mean, they have a lot of just needs. They have therapists, they have psychiatrists, they have so my second youngest has been through speech therapy and play therapy. They've been through trauma therapy. They've been through, a million, other things. And so that really does help a lot as far as, making sure they get all the services that they need.
Yeah.
Private adoption, on the other hand. So that's between $30,000 and $40,000 out of pocket
for one kid.
Yeah. And you're on a waiting list. And that's difficult. I mean, we signed up. So when we looked at starting a family, we also, with our agency, signed up for what they call special adoptions, which I hate that they group it this way, because technically that includes minority babies. And I don't like that. I feel like that should only be for kids with significant disabilities, which are harder to adopt. So
they just include them just because they're like Black or Asian or whatever?
They include them because, and I hate saying this because like, I hate the way they grouped it.
Yeah.
Because there are so many Caucasian families in private adoptions, and for whatever reason, a lot of them choose Caucasian babies because I think they think it makes it easier if the kids look like you. It doesn't. Eventually, there's some differences. I had my first "you're not my real mom" 2 weeks ago, and my child looks like me. I mean, it's just, you end up with, there's differences, but so we signed up for the special adoptions. I hate saying that, but that's what they grouped it as. And, we were open to children of color adoptions. And so we looked at, we got some calls for that, but at the same time, the birth mother still has to pick you, just like with typical adoptions. And, we didn't end up getting placed with any of those, but then we got our 3 wonderful boys. And adoption costs vary significantly based on the needs of the birth mom, because you could end up paying for her transportation, her living situation. Like if she doesn't have a place to live, you could end up paying for a hotel her whole pregnancy, or, geez, an apartment or something, so you pay for food if she needs it. You pay for her doctor's appointments. And after all that, she could at the last minute decide to keep the baby, and she does not have to pay you back because you can't buy a baby.
That just blows my mind.
It does. Is that so? That's why we're like, well, I don't know that I can do this because that's tough. And I've had friends that went through it, and they just adopted again shortly after Milo was born. They ended up getting placed with a baby boy. So, I mean, it's tough. And a lot of people end up fundraising because it is outrageous.
Yeah.
It's crazy because you have to pay for lawyers too. You have to pay all the lawyer fees. And typically people are with an agency. You have to pay agency fees to market your family to different birth moms. I mean, it is really expensive.
And they could still be on drugs and addicted to drugs and all that too, couldn't they? I mean, would that be breach of contract if they did?
You would be notified of that. And I think that might fall into like a special needs types of adoption. Like we got a call about a baby whose mom was in jail. But, I didn't have any details about why she was there, how long she was going to be there, but she was placing the baby for adoption. And so we, put our name in for the child. But, I think legally they have to tell you. I mean, they're going to test all the babies anyway at birth for things in their system. So, I mean, you would know one way or another. So, I mean,
you still don't know what you're getting yourself into because you could be having a baby that's withdrawing and having severe medical needs versus if you adopt through, like fostering, you kind of have an idea of if they're showing signs of it and all.
Yes and no.
Okay.
Because, we knew going in that there was mental illness on birth mom's side. Our kids may deal with it. They may not. And we don't have all the information about it. So before you adopt, you can look through their file and you're not allowed to take pictures or write anything down. So it's kind of pointless in a way because
like you can't look them up on Facebook.
Yeah. It's not like, I mean, you have their file, but then you have their complete history in foster care. So luckily for our boys, we had their birth records in that file, but important stuff that I would be able to tell a doctor down the road, I don't remember because I saw it, in 3 hours. I looked through a box as big as this couch, and we could have stayed there all day, but I wouldn't have remembered everything. Yeah. You remember the big things that jump out at you like, whoa, okay. But you don't remember those little details like I do with Milo that, he was born at 9:32 p.m. on January 24th and he was 8 pounds, 1 ounce. I mean, I don't know that stuff about my kids. I know when they were born. I don't know where they were born. I don't know exactly what was in their systems when they were born. So, it's different. I feel like they should give that to you as an adoptive parent, to have on hand to explain to doctors, because my 4-year-old, he was a neonatal abstinence syndrome baby, right? And he had tremors till he was 6 months old.
Oh my God!
So I mean, I've done my own research about NAS, but I don't. And that's why it's so hard with a lot of these drugs is you don't know the long-term effects because it's not the same for everybody,
right?
So I can guess some of the things that he does are probably because of it, but like he's a screamer. He has little man syndrome. He is loud and in charge. He is a boss baby. But and I've read that that's fairly common for NAS babies, and he's really little, like really little. I know his birth dad's small, but he is also like we just found out he has some sort of hearing impairment in his left ear, but we don't know why or what kind of hearing loss it is. Mm-hmm. So it could be because of the, drugs, or it could be random. We don't know. So, and I feel like I have to explain, and you get some weird looks too. Like if you don't explain, because it's like, oh yeah, he had drugs in his system when he was born. I mean, you're going to get looks if you say that and not explain, so I've had to explain that quite a few times. And then you get the awkward questions. People are curious and they want to know the gossip.
Yeah.
And people ask inappropriate questions all the time, but you just get kind of used to it.
I hope none of mine were.
No. I mean, when we were fostering, they'd be like, so is the mom on drugs? I'm like, why would I tell you that? You're my dentist. Like, why would I tell you that? I actually did get that question at my dentist, and I would just say, I don't know, because it's not their business. And if I say, well, it's none of your damn business, then it's just kind of awkward.
Then you're the rude one.
Yeah. So, I mean, you just go, I don't know. And they're like, well, usually they tell you. I'm like, well, I don't know. They didn't tell me anything.
It's just between me and their agency. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, people just ask, and that's such a common question with foster kids. So is their parent on drugs? Like, why would you ask me that?
That's like when you're pregnant and you're super huge and they're like, are you sure there's not two babies in there?
Yes.
I mean, it's not quite as bad, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. Or if you're too small, then they, wow, you're really small, or you're huge. So yeah, I never had the problem of being really small, so
neither have I.
I assume that's how it feels. But
someone said, you must be having a girl, but like looking at a picture of me, I'm like, what is that supposed to mean? This is supposed to get real ugly when you're pregnant with a girl. I'm like, thanks. I have 3 boys, but yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no, I never had that glow that you're supposed to get with boys. So I'm like, well, he must be really pretty because he definitely stole mine. So I mean, it's just this weird, people ask weird questions all the time.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. It's been great talking about pregnancy and about adoption and all that, because that's definitely part of becoming a mom.
Yeah. So. Yeah. There's actually, I've met some really great foster and adoptive moms around here. It's, once you set the word out that you're a foster adoptive mom, you somehow find each other. So it's been nice to, connect with people that get it and won't judge your kids. So that's always good to have.
Yeah. I used to kind of talk to my husband about, what if we adopt a girl? It's the only way we're ever going to get one.
Yeah, that's the only way to be for sure that you're getting a girl. Yeah, about that. I don't know. We talked about maybe trying for a girl, but if I end up with 5 boys, I'm going to need my own house.
You know what's going to happen.
So yeah, maybe.
Oh, man. So tell us about like any contact information, and I'll put it on the Instagram group.
Sure. Yeah. So, well, I think my Facebook is private, but I can give an email address that you can contact me at if you have any questions. But it's Cate Beard, CateBeard @gmail.com. And you can reach me on there, and I can try to answer any questions that you may have, or we can set up a time to just sit and talk. I'll definitely give you the nitty gritty because I feel like that's necessary if you're going to go down this route. And I feel like, that's what I would have wanted when I was looking at it. So if you have any burning questions about foster adoption, I'd be happy to answer them. But so that's the way to reach me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to this incredible mom story today. I really hope you enjoyed it and that it may have helped you in some way. Make sure you rate and leave a comment so I can be sure to bring you the content that you really want. Please follow the Incredible Moms podcast on Instagram, where you'll also be able to find many updates and episodes. I can't tell you how much I appreciate any support. Stay tuned for another Incredible Mom next week.